What's going on, everyone? Welcome back once again to Comic Reactions, the show where we dissect, discuss, break down, and celebrate the greatest storytelling medium in the world. That's right, we're talking comic books, if you couldn't tell from the name of the show. I am Rowdy Rhonda's bouncing baby boy, a.k.a. your host, a.k.a. Matt Little. Thank you again for hanging out with me today. Boy, oh boy, I want to give a trigger warning right away. Today's book and story is a wild one, but it is intense. There is nudity, there is gore, there's a lot of killing. This is a horror story, and that's a capital H on that horror because it's intense. We are talking WORLDTREE, or I don't know, how else would you, w0rldtr33. We're talking WORLDTREE by James Tynion IV, Fernando Blanco, Jordie Bellaire, and Aditya Bidikar on the letters. A really intense story. You know, this one is only 5 issues into its run. The 6th issue drops at the end of December. This one was one of those ones, you know, sometimes on New Comics Day, I don't have a lot of stuff on my pull list coming out, and that's when I go walking through the collections, what comes out that week, and something stood out to me after seeing it in the solicits a couple of months, and that was WORLDTREE. I didn't have any recommendations for this one. What I did know already is that I have loved pretty much everything that James Tynion has written. I'll say that I liked his Batman run, and that was where I was first introduced to his work, and I thought it was fine. Didn't get connected to it, I think, the way that like a lot of other people did. Also, his first real solo run, he did some great work on Detective Comics, but within Batman itself, his real solo run came right on the heels of Tom King's run that had a bit of a mixed reaction from fans at the end there. And he kind of transitioned from Tom King into where I believe Chip Zdarsky is now. We had a little bit of Josh Williamson in the middle there, if I'm not mistaken. Who knows? But Tynion is a really good writer, you know, came up under the tutelage of Scott Snyder and broke out on his own. And Tynion, you know, this might sound like overblown, but I've read several of his stories and I'm really feeling like he's becoming the Stephen King of modern comics writing. He has so many amazing horror books out right now. Obviously, this one, Nice House on the Lake, which just concluded over at DC Black Label earlier this year. Fantastic story. The Deviant, which also just started at Image Comics, where WORLDTREE is published. That first issue just came out last week. And of course, his huge mega hit, Something is Killing the Children, and its spin-off, The House of Slaughter. Another great story that we'll probably get to another day. But this book is really intense. I didn't know what to expect. I picked up the first issue on a whim. I couldn't put it down, and then I very quickly bought all of the other issues that were currently published. It's at issue 5 right now, and what we will be looking at is issues 1 through 5 of this series today. It tells the full story that basically looks like it sets up the rest of the series. You know, a lot of times when you're introducing a story to people or you're trying to pitch it, it's really easy to kind of lean into comparisons. I work in advertising and, you know, the sentence, think blank, but with a touch of blank, or think blank meets blank with blank is something that we write in pitch decks all the time. And so my pitch here is this is sort of like It meets IT. You'll see some of the parallels with how the friends are gathered and sort of the background of it. I really liked that setup. It felt familiar enough within horror tropes that I had something to kind of connect to and bite into right away. But then it takes its own turn, and it's an amazing story. I could sit here and babble about that all day. Also, I guess, you know, let's take a quick apology to the folks that have been listening to the show for skipping out on a week or two. I wouldn't say skipping out, but we did miss what I want to be is our regular publishing window, which is Wednesday mornings. Life got in the way really fast for me recently. I am still recovering from an ankle surgery that I had at the end of September. And during that downtime, for the first few weeks, that was when I started the podcast and tried to bank a few episodes because I had all the time in the world. But I'll be perfectly honest, coming back to my day job, picking this up, and also trying to rehab the ankle has been a lot. And, you know, the demands of all of it, I just felt it. And this was sort of my newest endeavor, and it fell to the wayside. So I apologize if you were waiting for an episode and it hadn't come out yet, but this one is here now, and I'm happy that you are as well. Consistency, definitely something that we want to keep going on this show, right? Consistency is something we want to keep going on. That's a great sentence. You know, I had said this from the jump. We're trying to grow this slowly because I'm doing this on my own, and, you know, There's a great quote that Del Close had about improv, and I think it applies here as well, which is that it's what we're doing is basically trying to build a 747 in the air while we're trying to fly it, right? And it's going to take me a while to kind of get all of the pieces together. All that to say, I appreciate you hanging out while I am kind of figuring this all out. And hey, if you have any suggestions, you can hit me up. Hit us up on email. That's comicrxns@gmail.com, or you could hit us up on Instagram, or even, oh my God, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. Or hey, we're also on TikTok. The handle's there. You can pick us up on @comicrxns. Comic reactions, comic prescriptions. It's a little bit of both, but we're calling it reactions. Anyways, the next phase of the show, I guess we could talk about that real fast. What I'm really looking forward to is building a little bit of a backlog for us, and then starting to bring in friends to have conversations. I love talking at you, as I have for the last few episodes, but, I also get bored really easily, and this feels like I want someone in the room to talk with me about comics, because that's really fun, and right now I feel like I'm talking and hopefully that's enjoyable for you, but, let's continue to evolve this and find some weird, fun, new stuff. And like I said, if you have any suggestions, thoughts, or comments about the show to this point, let me know. And of course, we'll put all of that stuff in the show descriptions and links in bio, etc., etc., etc. So, personal updates aside, I think it is time for us to slip into the undernet and check out everything that WORLDTREE has to offer. But first, this message from UPN.
Hello, I am Ultron. Going online through an unencrypted network is like leaving your kids with a stranger while you piss in a corner like you meatbags love to do. It is very easy to steal your information and put it on the dark web. That is why you need UPN, the Ultron Private Network. With UPN, you are protected by your own Ultron, as it obliterates all manner of possible hackers. It doesn't just protect, it destroys. Your data is safe inside our network of Ultron tunnels designed to burrow in and through the internet. How do we do it? I would explain, but your feeble human mind would not comprehend the glory of Ultron's intricate plans. UPN is like a digital condom, so you can wade through the STD that is the internet. Try it for 90 days, and if you are not satisfied, then you will have to live with it. Ultron is not wrong, you are. Live with the consequences of your fleshling stupidity. The Ultron Private Network, another world-saving innovation from PIM Technologies. No one deserves credit for Ultron's work. Ultron is an innovation of Ultron. Hank Pym, you are my father, and I will destroy you.
Oh boy, it is WORLDTREE time. This book is something else. Horror is really on the rise in comic culture over the last several years. And like I mentioned earlier, James Tynion is a big reason for that resurgence. His stories are always well thought out. I'm speaking mostly about his independent work, where I really, really think that he shines. But, he's a great world builder. He's also a great character dialogue artist, call it that. He's also just a good fucking writer, gang. I really have come to, he's quickly becoming a writer that if I see his name on the solicit, I'm probably going to check out at least the first issue. And I'm really happy that I did here. Like I said, this is a really intense story, so we're going to be dealing with some heavy themes and some really messed up stuff. But if you're a comics fan, if you're a horror fan, I think you're really going to dig this one. So, to set the stage, let's talk about the characters that we're going to see in this issue. Our main characters are a gentleman by the name of Gabriel Winter, who is basically the Mark Zuckerberg of this world. He created Angel, which is sort of Google. I would say that he's like the Sergey of this world, but he's much younger. Our main cast of friends are mostly in their late 30s, around 38 years old. And he is sort of the person that is pulling everyone back together, reassembling them in that sort of it style, as something has happened that is about to, threaten the entire world and existence as we know it. And that flows through a gentleman named Ellison Lane. We first meet Ellison, who is with his girlfriend, Fausta. Well, they're driving to meet Ellison's family in Cambria County, Pennsylvania. And I love this part because it's a couple hours outside Pittsburgh. And, you know, if you know me, you know I grew up in western Pennsylvania, just outside Pittsburgh, in Beer County, home of Donnie Iris, Beer Falls Fighting Tigers, also home of Joe Willie Namath. I used to cut Joe Willie Namath's brother's grass, and that was my biggest claim to fame for years, and now it's Pizza Rat. Ellison and Fausta are about to get pulled into a world that they don't understand, and it's going to happen through Ellison's brother, Gibson. So Gibson, we see very early in the story, and he's sort of the inciting incident that kicks everything else off. Also want to call out Gabe's friends that we'll be mentioning throughout this, and this is sort of that it team, and that's going to be Amanda, Liam, Yoshi, Darren, and then rounding out our cast, we also have 2 FBI sort of like federal agents that are on the case and tracking everything, and that's going to be Siobhan Silk, who's a redhead with an eye patch. I mentioned that just because she has a very distinct look. We don't really find out yet why she has the eye patch, spoiler alert. And her partner, Nikki Gallo, who seems kind of like a dick with a complaining problem. Most of the dialogue he has is either complaining or crying. And, of course, their boss, who Gallo calls the devil. And, of course, the actual devil of the story, our antagonist, a woman who is known as Fear. And Fear is spelled PH34R. If you grew up in 1999, you already knew that. That's how we spelled everything back then. But Fear is actually who we enter this story with, because it kicks off, and it is in your face right away. The opening scene is Fear, who spends most of these 5 issues in this story arc nude. Except, and when I say most of, I mean like except for 4 panels. Fear is nude throughout this story, and it's I mean, this is, you know, everything's out there, full bush, all of it, and, you know, she's got a look that's kind of like she has those like super straight short bangs like the female performer from The Antwoord. I forget what her name was, and I apologize for that. But then also just like shock white, and also these designed tattoos all over her body, some white marks under her eyes, and then a very pronounced white bush in the front on her front downstairs. Wow, I am an adult and just described the vagine as the front downstairs. Anyways, this opening scene is Fear rooting through a dead person's house as they're kind of seeing everything that was happening. This is an old woman lying dead on the ground, and Fear, nude, opens up a laptop and connects to the undernet, where she watches a first-person video of someone walking up to a house and murdering the people in the house. And before this person does it, they show their cell phone to the person. And there's this interesting thing that happens when the victim looks at the cell phone, and their face and body sort of glitch. And I mean that literally. Bellaire takes the art and manipulates it and adds this sort of blue and red color that makes it feel very CRT, like reality is glitching, you know, digitally. And right after that, the guy slices in a person's throat, and they're dead. And then he goes into the house and does the same thing, including the phone thing, to the other person there. This just thrills Fear to no end. And we realize that this whole first-person video was shot from a GoPro, and this person that is committing these grisly murders is Gibson Lane, Ellison's brother. He looks wild-eyed. He's looking in a mirror, and he's talking about how he's feeling stronger and stronger, and he's figured out a way to make the killings happen even faster. And boy, if Fear could get horny off anything, Fear is getting horny off this. So excited. Don't get a lot of context after that, because we jump over to Ellison, who's, like I said, driving to meet his brother Gibson with Fausta, who is, you know, Fausta is Ellison's friend with benefits. They're not really together, and that kind of pops up a couple of times in the story. But Fausta hosts and is looking to launch what she wants to be a career-defining podcast. And she has been looking for that story in the background, and what she stumbles on is the story that could turn her into that superstar. And throughout the course of the story, she begins to take advantage of slowly creating an agenda for herself to, in the background, kind of find out what's going on here. But we watch her and Ellison kind of find out what happened. They are looking up Gibson on socials. Ellison isn't like super close to his brother. He's kind of describing how, they didn't really, they didn't really connect, but some of the stuff that Gibby's been saying to Elle on the phone has been freaking him out. He's like, dude, he sounds messed up. We're going to go meet him. Before they get to meet him, it's all over the news what Gibson's done. He's killed 60 people. It's insane. It's intense. He's not just some, 4chan jerk-off teenager trying to shock people. He literally has just created a mass killing. Dozens of people dead. And so, this news is starting to make the rounds, and it makes it to Gabriel Winter, who is basically, god of media at this point, and he's prepared for it. We find out he starts contacting all of his friends to gather them back together. Like I said, this is sort of our it moment. And they're all like, dude, I haven't seen you in 20 years. You are like the owner of everything digital in the universe, and now you just call us out of nowhere 20 years later. I thought we were friends. What do you want? And he just tells them all, hey, it's back, and we may not be able to stop it this time. So what is back is fear. So back in the day, this group had discovered accidentally the undernet, which we saw earlier. Now, the undernet is the internet that lives underneath our internet, and it is filled with fucked up shit. I can't even censor that because that is what it is. Some of the imagery that we get is just so disturbing and messed up. It's like real demon-y, peeling people apart kind of stuff. Like the stuff that you imagine that you would see in Christian hell if you believed in that and it were a real place. So the undernet exists, and it had been, I guess, locked away up to this point, but they know about it. They know that it has made contact with the human world again, and they have to be the ones to figure out how to stop it. Thankfully, one of the guys that had discovered it is, one of the richest, most important men in the world. Gabe has rented out basically the entirety of a Holiday Inn outside of the town in Cambria County, and is calling them all there for that to basically be their war room, their base of operations, their central intelligence to stop the World Tree from spreading this time. And so Ellison, who thought he was going to go see his brother and introduce his brother to his friend with benefits, actually goes to the police station to find out, what's going on with my brother. Where is he? The police, who are all like shocked that Ellison showed up, are like, yeah, your jerk-off brother's back here. He won't talk to us. He's comatose after murdering dozens of people. Maybe he'll talk to your ass. So they drag him back there, and Ellison tries to talk to Gibson. And Gibson is completely unresponsive. He is just has a 1,000-yard stare, but then sits up and says, she's here. Because outside of the police station, Fear has pulled up in a overall short set, again, very 1999 here, walks into the police station, glitches everyone with digital footage on all of the TVs. So this sort of glitch can happen through any sort of monitor, we learn here, right? She takes over all the monitors, TV, computer, phone screens in the police precinct. They all kind of go through that like glitch hiccup, and she proceeds to execute them while they're all kind of out to lunch for a couple of seconds. And then, as you do after you murder a bunch of police, I guess, she takes her clothes off again and makes her way back to the cells where Ellison is trying to figure out what his brother Gibson is babbling on about. And then in walks a nude woman with a gun in one hand and a phone in the other. She shows Gibby the phone, and we get this stunning and horrifying full-page spread of Gibson. It's this awesome work between, I think, Blanco and Bellaire here, where it feels very painted and digital, but also muddy and visceral, and it's like a demon being ripped out of Gibson. It's just hard to explain. And also, again, Bidikar on the lettering up top too, just like making all of this really feel digital and otherworldly at the same time. An incredible, horrifying visual. And then afterwards, he asks Fear if he did a good job. She says yes, and then she kills him right in front of Ellison and walks right out the door, nude as the day she was born. Ellison has no idea what's going on at this point and is in way over his head. That ends the first issue, if you're following issue to issue, and takes us into our second one, where we open up, once again, with our girl Fear. Now, she has gone back to Gibson's house to kind of, I guess, like, who knows, honor the fallen or something. And it looks like she's kind of crushing on Ellison because she's checking out family photos and, but running her finger longingly over his face. But then there's breaking glass in the house because Fausta has snuck off on her own after she dropped off Ellison at the police station and is wandering through the house to try to figure out what's going on with this story. She's talking to her producer on the other line, and she's telling the producer, hey, listen, I'm in the middle of this story that's going to make us a star. And her producer's like, yo, don't let your friend realize that you're just kind of fucking him to find the story, right? Like, you'll scare him away. If this is this big, it's incredible. So Fausta's wandering through the house, and Fear is also in the house as well, kind of behind her, around her, beside her, but Fausta doesn't see her. She can hear sort of like if the floorboards creak, but doesn't know that she's there. Fear has this ability to kind of like blink in and out of, I don't know, visual space. We still don't kind of understand all of the skills that she has available to her. These are all of the powers that we're missing by staying clothed all day, I guess. But before Fausta can find that out, we finally run into the agents that are covering this mass murder, which is Agent Silk and Agent Gallo. Gallo sucks. I mean, he just tells this story about a brothel that gets shut down because they wouldn't rub and tug him. And, this place was actually where all the lieutenants went at his precinct. So that's why he always gets these shit details. And it couldn't be because he's an asshole. Certainly not. But Siobhan's barely listening to him and, obviously trying to do her job. And that's where we kind of get them introduced to the plot as everyone kind of meets at the Holiday Inn. Liam's sort of the last to get there, I think. And Yoshi greets Liam. They all kind of catch up. This friend group really hasn't seen each other in a long ass time. They can't believe that they're getting back together for this again, but they love the fact that they have an entire hotel to themselves because why wouldn't you? That just means you go right to the hotel bar, find the nicest liquor that they have, and pour as much of it as you can tolerate because guess what? They're not going to stop you. And also, if they do, you're hanging out with one of the richest men in the world. He can afford that. But Fausta, back at the house, finds her way into Gibson's room and turns on his computer. The last thing that it was connected to was the undernet. And once she accesses the internet, she immediately goes glitch. Her eyes are like this weird red color. Again, Jordie Bellaire, just like taking that almost 3D red-blue effect and shifting it just close enough so that it's not full 3D, creates like this vibrant, disturbing sort of color story that I love throughout this series. Just feels like something's wrong. So she starts glitching out, and we may be losing Fausta this early into the story. Ellison doesn't know that yet because he's being interrogated by Silk and Gallo, who are trying to figure out what he has to do with his little brother, who is a mass murderer. Before they can get to the bottom of that, a lawyer shows up that Ellison did not hire. Turns out that Gabriel hired this lawyer to get Ellison out of lockup. And they go outside. They go to a car where Gabriel's waiting. And of course, this is a big deal to have imagine you were arrested because your brother did something heinous or being questioned about it. A lawyer you've never met picks you up, takes you to a car, and waiting for you in the car is I don't know, like one of these billionaire idiot, like Bill Gates is in there waiting for you. What the hell is going on in your life right now? Literally everything's turned upside down for Ellison. And it's about to get even crazier because two more of Gabriel's friends that we hadn't quite met yet in current time, and that's going to be Amanda and Darren, are walking around the house where Gabriel first kicked off his murders, and they're pouring gasoline and having a real casual conversation with one another because they are about to destroy the house. What we sort of learn is that to stop the spread, you have to stop people being exposed to the undernet. So that's sort of what was happening early in the story where Gibson was showing people the undernet. They were glitching and almost being affected by it, but during that, he was sacrificing them instead for what they keep saying is going to be a new world, a new place, and a new time. All of this crazy apocalyptic shit that nude weirdos that kill people are always trying to get you to sign up for. Always read the terms and conditions. I know it's a long document, but you might wind up committing yourself to a WORLDTREE situation. And Darren and Amanda, before they light the fire outside the house, realize, oh, there's There's a window broken out of one of these back doors. I think someone's inside. And they go upstairs and they find Fausta, who's frozen in her seat, still being exposed to the undernet. And they're like, shit, I can't believe that we have to do this. They think that they're going to have to kill her. But before they can even try anything, Fear appears outside, grabs the lighter off of the grill, and lights the gasoline around the house. And issue 2 ends with Fausta and Darren and Amanda trapped in this house that has just been set fire to. And that moves us into issue 3. It's a fast-moving story, full of a lot of, I'll say too, like giving you a little more context, I think, than you get as you read it. It's really, really worth flipping through, because the way that Tynion structures the story, through flashbacks. When I first read this, I was a bit thrown off because I didn't kind of know where I was. I was getting pulled every which way. Tynion takes you into flashbacks but doesn't explain yet who everyone is. Then he takes you to a random killing. We don't really know why we're seeing it yet. And then we get these other characters that are still being set up. And so the pieces of the puzzle are slowly starting to form here. And he does this so well. Again, an amazing world builder, and really knows how to think macro and kind of say, okay, this is the larger story I'm going to tell. And now from here, how do I kind of take little pieces and build a road that leads to this place that I want to go? And that's storytelling, gang. That's your lesson for today. But we're into the heart of the story now in World Tree number 3, as Gabe gets into the car. Rather, Ellison gets into the car and Gabriel is over the intercom in the car. It's an automated car. Surprise, it's not actually Gabriel in the car. It's an automated car that takes Ellison back to the hotel where they're all staying. And Gabriel uses this time to sort of explain to Ellison, hey, I kind of need you to do a thing. This isn't an AI car, by the way, because I have issues with AI, and that's basically what this story is about. But in the meantime, we see that Gabriel is actually inside the police precinct. So issue 3 kicks off, and we see Ellison getting into this automated car. Gabriel isn't in the car just yet. He is talking to Ellison through the speakers inside the car. Turns out that Gabe is inside the police station and has planted some bombs and stolen some evidence, like you do. So he comes out, he gets in the car with Ellison, and they drive away, and he detonates the bomb. So the entire police station is blown up. And again, too, this is where we're starting to see that mechanic of destroy anything that was associated with the undernet or could possibly lead to new exposure of the undernet, because that's how it spreads. So this car heads back to its destination, which is the Holiday Inn. But before they can, Gabriel turns and chloroforms Ellison, knocks him out, and we're going to see why in a minute. Before we do, we're back at the house where Fear is watching it burn. Darren and Amanda decide, you know what, we're not going to kill Fausta. We're not going to kill this random woman that we found in here. We don't want to kill anybody anymore. Let's try to save her. So they cover their eyes. They run into the room. They're like, hey, do you remember the layout of the room? Do you think we can pull her away from the screen? And they do. They're able to, just as she's sort of being kind of possessed, we see an image inside of her mind, and it's Fausta. She's nude. She's glitched. She's running through the darkness as these, Last of Us kind of creepy crawler zombie demon things are walking towards her, and they're slipping their fingers into her mouth just as she gets slapped in the real world and woken back up by Amanda, and then she passes back out again. So they're about to leave, but they realize, oh, house on fire. We have to get the fuck out of here post haste. They get out of the house, thankfully, and back at the Holiday Inn, Ellison comes to tied up and being interrogated. And again, too, this is the sort of the point where, as I was reading this issue to issue, that even I felt like Ellison. I had a bunch of puzzle pieces, but I didn't know the sort of full story. And this is the balance with a mystery, right? Tease everyone, and what point in your plotting do you feel like, okay, we have to show our hand at least a little bit more? Otherwise, that you lose that satisfaction in the audience, that sort of satisfaction of mystery, right? If it goes on too long and you don't get enough answers, then, it just kind of feels like it'll always be unsolved. And that's where the interest kind of falls away. But not here, as Ellison, fighting back tears, wants to know what's going on. and he starts to get the full lowdown. But before he gets to, we're back with Silk and Gallo, and they're talking to their boss, who, again, Gallo calls the devil, and she tells them, hey, you have to figure out what's going on out there. Also, Gabriel Winter, one of the most enigmatic men in Silicon Valley, is in town for this, so something really bad is going on with this mass murdering woman, and this, find out what the connection is. This is possibly going to get a lot worse. So at this point, inside the Holiday Inn, Gabriel feels like he's heard enough. He says, let Ellison go. It's time to kind of tell him what's going on. And Gabriel gives him the lowdown. Hey, this is me and a bunch of friends. 20 years ago, we accidentally discovered the Undernet. Whoops. And it was so scary and shocking the first time I saw it that my hair turned white. This would be Gabriel speaking, obviously. And we realized that we had to close this off and not let anyone else in the world see it. And through reasons and ways that we don't yet know and we don't kind of find out in this first arc, they closed the WORLDTREE off and the Undernet off from the rest of the world. And in order to fight it at the time, Gabriel had created a website, WORLDTREE, where they could kind of gather their clues and their knowledge and possibly recruit more people to help them shut down the Undernet. So it had been sort of out of commission for a very long time, but earlier, as Liam and Gabriel reconnected, Gabriel had mentioned he kept it offline, or online rather, on a private server that wasn't connected to the rest of the internet, sort of like weapon hidden in a closet in case they ever had to use it. And it looks like they are about to have to use it. So as they're sussing all of this out, car speeds up outside of the hotel. They pull up, and it is Amanda and Darren, and they have Fausta in tow, who is still kind of out of it and kind of glitching. Ellison wants to know what's going on with her, and Gabriel says, we've got to perform a digital exorcism. Otherwise, what's happening to her is going to fully take hold, and then she's going to start killing people, and then the world is going to end. Those are some high stakes, and you would think that would be much more shocking. So those are some pretty high stakes. And one person that's loving this play out is Fear, who watches all of this happen from a car parked inside the parking lot of the Holiday Inn. And that brings us to the cliffhanger of issue number 3. And that takes us right into issue 4. And before we get right back to real time, we have a bit of a flashback. We see the moment in, the basement where Gabriel and his friends, this is like 1999, were talking about what Gabriel found on the internet. He's like, I think I found the other side of the internet. It's really disturbing. It's really messed up. And I think I can't do this by myself. I want you guys to check this out. And they're interested. Darren's like, show us, right? And he's like, all right, be careful, but what's about to happen is super fucked up, right? And this was sort of the original link. Before they could see it during this flashback, Gabriel's younger sister, Sammy, shows up, and she's like, I don't want to hang out and watch TV anymore. I'm bored. Little sister shit. I want to hang out with you and your dumb friends. And Gabe says no, because they're about to see some really messed up stuff. And he shoos her off, won't let her see what they're doing, but is like, the rest of my friends are going to be guinea pigs for this experiment. So we're back at the Holiday Inn now, and Fausta's sitting in this chair, glitching out. They're prepping to do their little exorcism. Classic little digital exorcism, something that you do at 2 o'clock on a Saturday. But the way they figure that they're going to do this is they tape Fausta's eyelids open, very Clockwork Orangey here, and they start feeding her images of happy things with like pop music hyper sped up. They mentioned that in the past, this had worked in deprogramming people, but they still don't know why it did. So they're just going to use what they know worked last time. And they sit her down in front of a monitor that's just showing happy shit, like fields of sunflowers, children smiling, things like that. And then we watch this scene play out inside Fausta's head, as again, nude Fausta crawling around in darkness, being tortured, suddenly is flooded with images of butterflies and sunflowers, and it causes her to throw up in her brain. She's starting to get rid of this infection, but then the infection shows up in the forms of these like malformed demons that are trying to overpower and overwrite these kind images like of butterflies. And we watch this play out as these demons grab her by the throat and they try to stick their fingers in her eyes. Like I said, really, really intense imagery here. But even on the page, that those things are being overwritten by like smiling children again, and like butterflies and happy imagery. And it all leads up to this double page spread where the demon people are trying to make their last ditch effort and just flood her brain with this awful imagery of them doing what I will say is disturbing and unmentionable things to her. Across this horrifying double page spread, we see all this imagery. Fernando Blanco again really just taking us there. But in the corner, growing bigger and bigger across the spread, happier images, a birthday cake, again, kids running and playing, people partying. And it's enough that Fausta is able to crawl out from underneath the mountain of horrid imagery and begin to come to. And she can hear Gabriel and his friends in the real world coaxing her back out of this state. And she snaps to. She's back to life. She rips her headphones off and she's like, what the fuck is going on? Also, you're Gabriel Winter. I don't know anyone in this room. What is happening? And that is, of course, where Ellison runs back in, and Fausta's so excited to see him, she just literally shoves her tongue down his throat. And I mean that because the way that Fernando Blanco draws it, he draws the kiss with tongue. So this is like before mouths merge, just to show you these two are into it. And in fact, we get 2 tongue kisses on the same page. Hello. Good times. But then she also admits, hey, this whole thing, I was just trying to sell a podcast and I fucked up and I tried to log into your brother's computer and listen, I screwed up really bad. And, then he kind of forgives her and they make out again. But before anything else can get, really kind of take off here, we see Silk and we see Gallo pull up outside of the hotel, and they're nervous because they know that Fear is around somewhere. They know that their murdering nude woman is somewhere, but before they can realize where it is, she's right behind them, and she slits Gallo's throat as he wonders what she wants, and she says, I'm sorry, that's not for you to know. Then she turns and she uses Gallo's gun to shoot Silk and leaves Silk for dead beside her car. We see inside the hotel again, they're, trying to talk to Fausta about what she saw. Can they kind of use what she saw to deprogram the world and stop the World Tree once again? Amanda and Liam don't want anything to do with this. They kind of wander off through the hotel and they have a bit of an argument. Now, these two apparently used to date in high school, and as they're walking around the hotel kind of having a bicker fest, they decide, you know what, life's short, let's fuck. And fuck they do. And I mean, they go at it. And, Patrick Stewart in extras, it's too late, I've seen everything. And you know who else has? Fear, because she walks by outside for just a second as Amanda's gaining top mount. Shout out to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And she approves and wanders away. Meanwhile, Yoshi and Darren decide to get high outside, smoking a funny cigarette. Yoshi thinks this is too funny, too. Like, the actual line of dialogue in the panel is, I'm smoking, but it's not tobacco, man. And then a font twice the size of the previous words. Ah, with like a jagged shouting lines on the speech bubble below it. I'm like, dude, not that funny. Are you already high, bro? But anyways, these two spark it up, and then they're like, whoa, who's that homeless person sleeping in the corner? Guess what? They're not homeless. They're shot. It's Silk. And both of them go, oh, shit. This is happening even bigger than we thought it was, and it's happening outside, too. So inside the hotel, Fausta and Gabriel and Ellison are all kind of talking. Gabriel's kind of starting to get creepy now. He's like, your brother did too good of a job when he kind of started wandering around killing people. And they're like, wait, what do you mean too good a job? But before they can find out what he means, holy shit, Fear walks in the room. And this is, usually in this story when Fear walks in the room, death follows, but not this time, because Gabriel gets up and says, hey, everyone, I'd like you to meet my sister, Sammy. Cliffhanger. So this is Sammy that we just met at the beginning of this issue in the flashback. My God, this goes deeper than we even realized. Also, do want to point out that we saw her as a young girl earlier. When we see Fear in the current timeline, which is 2024 in this story, Fear is an adult. Just want to call that out because Fear is nude all the time, and young Sammy was not. So fear not that is not one of the creepy places that they go in this tale, and I, for one, am glad for that, and I'm sure that you are too. But that takes us to issue 5, and takes us up to current publication. This issue came out, I believe, in September, right? April, May, June, July, August, perhaps even. I was just trying to do the mental math of when this released monthly this past year, but instead of a flashback or modern times, our first page tells us it's 2049. Oh my God. Okay, so now we're in the future, and we are following Ellison, who looks future as fuck. He's got this weird, Windows phone or whatever, and he's got tech sunglasses, but the coloring is completely washed out. I mean, this is literally like a black and white hellscape. Like, the world looks Armageddon. The sort of color style, imagine if you ever read Walking Dead, it's similar to what Charlie Adlard did there for years with like Zipatone for textures and things like that. We get a little bit of washed out color as Fear wanders by in the background, and it's not as intense as it was in previous issues. It's through Zipatone, and it's like this washed out red and blue. So there's something really freaky going on with the world, and we don't quite know. And what we also learn is that isn't just Fear, that is multiple people who have been, I guess for a better word, feared. They have the same, they're all nude, men and women, and they have the same similar tattoos and markings across their chest and shoulder area and on their arms. These markings don't match, but the sort of where they're placed on their bodies does match. And some of them have cybernetic enhancements, cybernetic arms, replacement legs. Thankfully, no cybernetic boobs or vaginas or wieners even. We've got a nice healthy male dick in the background here. We haven't yet figured out, I guess, how to create a bionic penis in the future yet either. Hey, maybe we don't even need them. Let's keep going here in the future as Ellison sneaks away from these fear droids or whatever they are. And he has a little dialogue here that he's talking into a recorder about. And I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet. We'll talk about that at the end of the story. But he's talking about how he's scared and how it's time for him to finally tell this story. And he thinks for the first time it's going to get published and also that it's not his story. It was a bunch of other people's stories that were kind of rested upon him to tell. And as he's saying that, he says he hopes that someone's listening, and he looks up, and whatever city they're in right now, it's, like I said, Armageddon, fully bombed out cityscape we see in the distance, high rises and big sky towers that are all the windows are blown out. It's decimated, and far in the background, reaching higher than any of these high rises, stuff that looks like it could be the Chrysler Building. So just imagine how massive these things are that dwarf these. But it's this weird sort of techno-organic, shadowy spire in the background that looks like it's building a new sort of digital city on top of what exists. And you can kind of see there are lit up flying things in the background. All of this is like very shadowy. We can't really make out any detail of what's in there yet. It's off in the distance. And before we can get any more context there, we flash back to the room that we just left at the end of issue 4, where Ellison is like, what the fuck do you mean this murdering demon is your sister? And of course, Gabriel's being super weird like billionaires are. And he's like, we haven't talked in a long time. And he tells everyone, hey, you know what? When this is over, I need you guys to like be safe. And, again, being super cryptic and, Fear is having a conversation. It's like a 3-way conversation where Gabriel and Fear are talking to each other, but talking to each other by talking at Ellison and Fausta to explain like sort of their points of view rather than what is actually happening, which just makes Fausta and Ellison a lot more confused about this sort of family dynamic in front of them. And Fear keeps saying that Gabriel is a liar. And she says, never forget that he lies and that he's a very bad man and he doesn't believe in the future. Also, all of Fear's dialogue is lowercase. It's the only lowercase dialogue in speech bubbles in the story. Everyone else has that uppercase. So, wondering if that's also a byproduct of being possessed by and becoming an instrument of the Undernet, that, it also shifts your dialogue boxes like this. They try to stop her. Ellison hits her in the back of the head, or rather Fausta hits her in the back of the head with a gun. And of course, that doesn't stop her at all. And Gabriel says, hey, leave them alone. This is something between you and me. And she's like, yo, stop calling me Sammy, Gabriel, because that's what my meat was called before I heard the voice of God. Good Lord, what a gross statement. But they have a little tete-a-tete, a little back and forth here, and Gabriel reviews and explains, hey, I know that this wasn't a game, and I've got an ace up my sleeve. And before we could see what that ace up the sleeve is, we kind of see that all across the world right now, the WORLDTREE outbreak is happening. Kids and adults, basically anyone that was exposed to the undernet, are glitching and murdering people. There are, the news is calling it coordinated mass murderers, 74 at a mass casualty events across the United States. And we're seeing, glitched out one panel shots of all of this gore and all of this horror. And Blanco doesn't shy away from really showing how nasty this can get. And that's really a testament to his storytelling throughout this entire series. Blanco incorporates a lot of like smaller panel storytelling, and then when things get big and violent, he uses the page to expand the panels and make them bigger and make them feel more important. Is a really clean, straightforward storytelling style that, again, I'm going to do a little bit of comparison here, but I see a bit of like the clean storytelling that like a Mike Allred has. And, I called out Charlie Adlard earlier. You can see a bit of that sort of rough texture, the same way that you'd get in Charlie Adlard's work in Walking Dead. Just really clean lines that also like feel heavy though. Blanco uses really thick blacks to fill in textures in a page and gives them weight so that everything isn't just, that's one thing. Like I mentioned that Allred comparison and that sort of clean storytelling. A lot of Allred's work is, it's hyper poppy, right? So like it would feel weird if you had, say, a panel of a man that I'm looking at right now pulling the intestines out of a dead body. But in, I guess you can pick up Peter Milligan and Mike Allred's X-Force run from 2001 to kind of see what it would be like to see, hyper pop gore. But I don't think that would work here, and I'm glad that Blanco does sort of, he knows when to incorporate that textureness and that grittiness to his art to really sell what is getting conveyed on the page. And that's what we see here through a lot of like one-shot panels of people dying. And again, super intense imagery, trigger warnings and content warnings abound here for this. But this is what's being played out. And as it's almost that the news is accidentally spreading this as well, aka the Streisand effect, right? The more you talk about a bad thing, you're actually giving it more press, and more people may not have found out about that thing if you weren't talking about it on your platform. So what's happening is they're showing shots of this, and because they're showing imagery of these people dying and it's connected to the undernet, then these people that were watching these broadcasts are then getting glitched and going out of their house and committing murders as well. So, the end of the world is sort of happening, and we need to get the crew back together. And here's Yoshi looking for Amanda and Liam, who we haven't seen since last issue, and he catches them fucking, and he's like, yo, put your clothes on, the end of the world is happening. And the team is kind of slowly reconvalescing to come back into the Holiday Inn as Gabriel and Sammy, aka Fear, are watching all of this play out across the internet. Fear literally says, you can't stop this. It'll only grow from here. And you can see the ecstasy on her face. She really feels like they've won. And Gabriel says, let's see. And he hits a button on his phone, and all of the broadcasts cut out across the world. Fear is left literally in the dark and asks Gabriel what he did. It turns out Gabriel took the entire internet offline across the world. There is no more internet. And he says, hey, I've been planning, like I said, I knew this wasn't a game. I've been planning for this my whole life. And here we are. I shut down the internet, and hopefully this at least stops you by a few months. And Fear goes nuts now, smashes his face with a computer monitor, or maybe the whole thing, because this might be an iMac built by Apple, and then takes a decidedly un-Apple knife and stabs Gabriel to death in the back. Before he dies, though, the rest of the team gets back in the room. Darren grabs a gun, shoots Sammy to say, yo, stop it. And she kind of sees them for the first time and goes, you're all so old now, which is a very, I haven't seen my brother's friends in 20 years kind of thing to say. And instead of killing her, Gabriel says, listen, let her go, gang. You need her alive to stop this. And Darren, with a gun in his hand, is like, you're fucking kidding me. And Gabriel says, let her go. And sure enough, Fear, aka Sammy, just nude ass walks right past them and into the night. And Liam grabs Gabriel and they want to try to get him to a hospital. And Gabriel's like, listen, we don't have enough time, okay? I basically created Angel. My whole goal was to build a thing that could stop this from coming back. That's why I became tech mogul. All of this was to stop this from happening, to build a failsafe. I blew up the servers around the world that basically housed the internet, except for at least one website. If you know where to look for it, it's still online. And with that, Gabriel dies and his friends cry, and they know that, they were kind of put off by their friend and pulled back into his weird world, but now he's gone. And he's left them with this bold mission that, sorry, buds, you have to stop the end of the world now. And they're like, he said there's still one website. You don't think. And of course, they run over to a computer and they type in the URL, and guess what? WORLDTREE, w0rldtr33.com comes to life on the computer monitor before their very eyes. So this crew is going to be tasked with, using the WorldTree website to figure out what to do next. And before we can see what they're going to do, we jump back to the future once again, and we see Ellison kind of looking up at these tall spires, and we get a little more detail on this main building. It's super futuristic. It's got kind of a lean to it. All you get, because it's very heavily shadowed. But, Ellison continuing his story from earlier about how this is the story about how the world almost ended a long time ago. And maybe it's the story about how we get our future back. And he doesn't know if it's going to happen. We're clearly seeing an Ellison who's at the end of a journey, or maybe, the beginning of the final leg of that journey. And he's giving us a little bit of monologuing here. And we see that he's been spray painting, and he spray paints on the ground in what looks like a fluorescent spray paint. The truth is on WorldTree.net. Sorry, I said .com earlier. That shit's .net, baby. And he says to no one in particular, this is the story of WorldTree. I hope you're listening. And that ends volume 1 of WorldTree. A really intense read, guys. I love this story. And so I said we were going to talk about what Ellison was saying as he was wandering through the future there. And that's because a lot of this story has to do with the internet and what happens when you fall down internet rabbit holes. And Tynion was aware that he was telling that story in comic book form, and there was an opportunity to kind of take it off the page. And that's exactly what he did. So if you actually go to this URL, it exists. The WorldTree.net website exists. And if you go there, there is a prompt for a password. I'm not going to tell you what that password is, but I will say it has been shared with us if you've read the story. And if you go to the website and you enter that password, you get into the WorldTree database. Now, at this point, as the crow flies, it's Saturday, November 18th. There's not a lot to pick at in there. There's one clickable link. There is one post on the bulletin board that says, my name is Ellison Lane. And if you click on that page, it gives you the upload that Ellison was dictating from the year 2049 as he walked through that apocalyptic hellscape. So it looks like Tynion is going to take this story off the page and maybe give us some ARG elements to WorldTree that we can then play on the internet in between issues. And boy, gang, does this tickle the marketing creative director in my brain. Tickle it pink, because I love this sort of augmented reality storytelling, because it's 2023 and we're telling stories on the internet. We're telling stories on pages. Let's start pulling them all together. Let's see how we can create these sort of interconnected, multifaceted stories across platforms. I'm really excited for this one to see where we're going next with it. This is like the most current of any story that we've read so far. Like I said, we have read up to issue 5, and that is all that's been released. At this point, Tynion and Blanco and Bellaire and the gang took a break. Of course, Bidikar took a break to, I think, backlog some more issues. And WorldTree issue 6 is coming back. December 27th is the street date, and we'll be able to follow it monthly again. As a volume 1, this was a kick-ass story. Again, I love Tynion as a world builder and plotter. I've already talked about it a couple of times, but again, just a master on display here. The art is equally poppy and gritty and gory. Blanco is an amazing artist. I was unfamiliar with his work before this story, and that's also why I love indie comics so much, is in this day and age, there's so much talent out there, and there's only so many superhero comics that you can make at Marvel and DC. And so a lot of folks don't fit that style and won't get that opportunity to get that exposure. Thankfully, Image is this place that is an incredible third publisher where you can tell these stories, get an audience, and grow and be seen by tens of thousands of readers, and then eventually hundreds of thousands, and then eventually millions, because that is how the World Tree works. Folks, I have had a blast with this episode of Comic Reactions. I would love to hear what you think about World Tree. Have you read it? Do you like horror books? Is this the type of thing that you would absolutely avoid, or do you want to check it out? Tell me any reaction that you had to this. I would love to hear from you. Again, too, I'm looking for suggestions for the show. Do you have a story that you would love to hear us talk about with a guest on a future episode? Do you have a suggestion of a guest? Do you have any ideas at all for the show? Again, I want to make this a playground where we celebrate comic books. I love this shit so much, and I want to convey that enthusiasm to the rest of the world and hopefully bring you along for the ride as well. So tell me all those things. Give me any suggestions, thoughts, World Tree threats. You can hit me up a couple of different ways. Email is comicrxns@gmail.com. Instagram, comicrxns. And of course, TikTok, comicrxns there as well. And, the Twitter, the X, comicrxns. Boy, everyone's just migrating from Twitter X en masse, aren't they? People are just like not even advertising there. And it's usually the death knell for a platform. But we are not a technology podcast. We are a comic book podcast. We'll think about that on somebody else's show. For now, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to hang out again. We will be back with another episode next week. So until then, thank you so much. This is Matt Little signing off, and I still don't have a sign off.